And we're back for another epic episode of Single Track. But first, a couple more last-minute Father's Day ideas. First up, Cellular MD Bio Advanced Skincare Daily Shield Lotion. What is it? Sunscreen and lotion you can use daily. Why? Because you're not getting younger and the sun is your skin's enemy. So, what is Daily Shield Lotion? A fast-absorbing, non-greasy lotion. That is, and it is very important, non-smelly. A SPF 30 sunscreen and moisturizer that protects your skin against environmental and sun stressors. So, if you spend a lot of time outside, and if you're a trail runner, you definitely do, look at getting a lotion and moisturizer for your skin. Especially your face and other exposed parts of your body will love you for it. Here's what you should do. Go to cellularmd.com. That's ZELLULARMD.com and learn about the science behind the products and start taking care of your skin. Speaking of taking care of your body, our second product for today's show is a CBD product. Dr. Kirkland Therapeutics sent me a natural CBD relief kit. The kit includes a cream, a relief stick, like a deodorant, and a spray. All offer a cooling sensation with eucalyptus and peppermint oils. They're designed to rub into the muscles and they offer lasting relief. If you are longing for a massage after a long run, try the natural CBD relief products by Dr. Kirkland Therapeutics. Visit drkirkland.com. I got to spell that. DRKERKLAAN.com to learn about the benefits of CBD and the natural, effective, plant-based solutions to help support your well-being. Thank you so much for those two awesome sponsors of this week's show. Again, links to all of these products can be found in the show notes. And now, as you are listening to this, you could check your podcast player and you actually should be seeing links to these products right in your player. So, without further ado, let's get on with the show.
When was the last time you hung out and did trails with a non-runner, non-speed hiker, like somebody that doesn't do a lot of physical activity?
Wow.
yeah, right off the bat. Right.
Did you say, but not hung out on trails, just hung out?
No, hung out on trails, like gone hiking, yeah.
Well, I mean, realistically, it's been forever just because of COVID and stuff, right? I think, when was the last time I really hung out? I mean, group runs. I mean, I've done focus stuff for specific races because I sort of accidentally got kind of sucked into this racing for this year. But overall, like last year, we all sort of did our own thing, right? And that completely changed everything.
I had like my first excursions with somebody who just doesn't get out into nature much at all. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is the average American. And I'm not saying that to brag about myself or anything. It just makes me realize just how easily we can jump out and be like, oh, this trail's like 4 miles and 400 feet of gain. This is a cakewalk, right? Like to go and hike, yeah, like it's no thought whatsoever. But then to go out I had a friend come and visit from Washington and hadn't seen him for years, right? And it was just like, all right, like, going slow, and I felt like I was going to kill him going up, like, easy hills.
I mean, it goes into everything, right? It's the comfort on driving off of the main roads. It's the kind of gear we casually have accumulated over the years and the kind of gear that we're willing to spend money on. And the kind of activities that we are comfortable in doing just because we are doing that stuff all the time, and then you meet people outside of your bubble, and of course that's just the bubble that you live in. You talk to somebody else and who is in their bubble, and you're like, I am a total fish out of water. I don't know how to behave, right?
Yep. It's crazy to just, be in this bubble and be mediocre in this bubble.
Yeah.
And then to I was out on a trail last week and I was running it and people were like, oh, you're running this? Like, they were amazed at what I was doing. And I'm like, running super. I could have walked faster, and I'm just dead on the trail, right? Just dead and moving. And these people were super impressed. And I was like, oh, all right. Like, different world, different bubbles. Like, and it's nice to be reminded of those, just because there is this, like, whether you want to or not, this comparison of the trail running community. Of if you're on a trail and someone passes you, you're like, oh, damn, they're running like 8:30s on this trail. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, by the average American, I'm in great shape. So cool. All right.
I know,
nice.
Right? I mean, I think this comparison is always really tricky, especially because get into the rat race of speed and accomplishment and abilities, gear, I think, is the other thing for me, right? I mean, what some people are able to afford and other people think is ridiculous, and what they have to make do with, and then you are dialed in with all these gadgets and stuff, right? Just think of the watch, right? It's like for us, it's so comfortable to have these devices and have this ability to perform with all of this help. And then you see other people. I think obviously it's also exasperated by the fact that we for a year try to social distance and run and do stuff on our own and stuff, and so we didn't really see anybody. If you on a Saturday in June or July go up Mount Illinois, you're very quickly reminded of the average people.
Yes.
And, that's no judgment, right? That's the important thing.
No judgment at all. It's awesome to see anybody out there.
No,
it's fantastic.
100%, right?
Yep.
It's but it's a healthy reminder of us that we sort of I mean, we are total nerds, right? We are way too much into this in some respect.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I was like, oh, I haven't done anything. We only did 4 or 5 miles of trails today, and I'm like, this is comical to me. This is
right.
I've only done like this much hiking today. I had like an 8-mile hiking day with a friend, and I was like, I really wish I would have ran. I'm like, what is wrong with me? This is so stupid. But it's also just that time of the year when the day is longer, the weather's better, and you're like, okay, it's time to start doing some long days.
Right. Absolutely.
And so speaking of long days, you just had a race that you completed.
Yes, Lumberjack 100. I did a Lumberjack 100K. It's up at Port Gamble. We talked briefly about it.
Is that a small K? That's kind of like I did the Lumberjack 100K. Or is
I mean, I think over here it's important because so many races call themselves blah 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 100, and by default everyone assumes it's the 100-miler, and you have to say 100 Lumberjack 100 because that's the name of the race, but then you always have to immediately justify it. I only did 100K, which given the conditions was just fine.
Only did 100K. Oh.
I'm serious, right?
62 miles.
Yeah, it ended up being like 69.
Such a slacker. Nice. Sorry, go ahead.
So anyway, yeah, exactly, right? I mean, who even gets up in the morning for 100K? I mean, it's a joke. We're not doing this anymore.
No.
I mean, after Zion, which was the ultimate race experience from the way I've always talked about how I enjoy racing, which is, you travel really far, you go to a special place that you've never been, you sort of add a vacation around it and then DNF from that. To have a race that is not
it's the way to go, really.
It is. I mean, I still love that process, right? But to sort of have a race where you literally sleep in your own bed, and I didn't even have to get up super early because the race started at 8, right?
I saw your picture that you posted in the morning driving there, and I was like, dude, that's like a leisurely approach to like that's my style of morning.
No, it was great. I mean, to have a race start.
I mean, 9 would have been better, but 8 a.m. start is not bad at all.
Given the temperature, I probably would have enjoyed a 6 a.m. start just to get a little bit of a head start in the day, but that would have made the morning and driving up really uncomfortable. That would have brought me into this possibility of, do I need to drive up the night before? But, driving Shelton Belfair out Kitsap Peninsula is very comfortable at 6 in the morning, right? So it was very leisurely and very nice. And I mean, it sounds ridiculous to run around 100K and just feel sort of comfortable going to the start line, right? It didn't really feel that difficult of a distance. And I sound ridiculous, and I'm sounding ridiculous.
Well, it's a long day in your backyard, and it's different.
Exactly.
It's much different, especially without, like, mountain summits, right? Like, you didn't have anything truly gnarly on the trail from what I could tell. It wasn't like flat circular trail, but you didn't have really, really loose scree to deal with. You didn't have, down climbing with ropes or metal or rebar in the thing, right? Like, you had kind of just a standard Pacific Northwest Trail experience.
Yes, and it was 12, 14-mile loops. And you always came back to the car. So I actually had my own aid station set up, if you will.
Yeah.
And that added to the comfort, too. I didn't have to worry about getting a drop bag to mile 50 or wondering if I needed it at mile 40 or mile 70, right? I mean, there are certain decisions that I didn't have to make because of the loops. And then on top of it, because you do the loops, you get to know the course really well, right? So you run one loop and you're like, okay, now I know every aspect of that course. Now I just have to do it 4 more times. Now I know where I can
coast. Now exactly. Now I know where I need to push it.
Exactly.
Or where the puddles are.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, it was the best race that I've ever run. I have never had a better race experience. And it had nothing to do with the fact that I've quote unquote came in third, which is obviously ridiculous. I mean, I don't know, right? You tell me how ridiculous it is, because there were essentially, I was third and last, which is the most hilarious thing. Because
that's awesome. That's the best.
So because there was only a 29% overall completion rate of the 50-mile, 100K, and 100-miler.
Wow.
It was people really.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
So people really struggled with the course, and I'm confused by that. I really am, because I just had such a great day out. Like, the course was challenging, and perhaps,
like how so? Like, describe what the course was like for those of us that weren't there.
Okay, so the course was challenging in a sense that it was classic Kaiser without the crazy steepness, but you had tons of twists and turns and challenging single track where you absolutely couldn't run and you absolutely could not get into a groove. So a good mixture of Kaiser and Capitol Forest is a good comparison, right? But at Capitol Forest,
so technical as far more mentally than physically exhausting by how much you have to focus.
Yeah, just like lots of single track twists and turns where the people who are running this thing, and I mean, I train on this stuff all the time, so I'm super comfortable on this, right? and just like short sections, short, steep up here, but not like Kaisers, not like I mean, there were a couple downhill sections, which were mountain bike trails that were steep, especially then at night when it started raining. It got treacherous, right? But it was
kind of like going up Rock Candy or something like that.
Yeah, but the difference with Rock Candy is that Rock Candy is kind of a long, steep approach where it's almost like relentless, right? Wherein this is sort of quick up, quick down, quick straight, quick right, quick left, quick twist, quick turn, right? I mean, if you
chopped all the Rock Candy and shuffled it together.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it felt like, right? It's like if you would take a Kaiser loop and sort of like stretch it over 14 miles. Mm-hmm. It's sort of really hard to get a 14-mile. I mean, I've tried to do a 14-mile loop without overlap, and it's really hard. And this was sort of this. Right? So there were
you kind of go up the same hill 3 times in Kaiser to do that.
More or less.
But like 100 feet away each time.
Yeah, so. More or less, right? And so this is... there definitely some forest roads in there where you got a little bit of a break, but I think so. So you've got a very twisty terrain, and then you pair that with, and this is what I wrote online to describe it. So you've got this twisty turn that I think people sort of miscalculated a little bit. Like I thought people didn't take Lumberjack that serious because it's a loop course in Port Gamble. How hard can it be? And then it was a lot more challenging from a course. A, B. The 2 days before it had rained really, really hard, and then race day in the morning and throughout the day, it was in the 80s. So it got really, really muggy.
Yep.
And people had a hard time with that, and I think that's what made a lot of people drop. And then we had an anticipation of rain starting at 9:30. And again, given the previous day's rains, I think people were a little bit scared off by that, right? They were like, well, I can fairly comfortable downgrade and, I'm signed up for the 100K, but I'll finish one loop short and I gotta get a 50-mile finish, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the third, that the downgrading felt easy because you could just decide that you're done with the loop, right? You 50 mile is 4 loops, 100K is 5 loops, and 100-mile was 8 loops, right? So you came back to the finish and you're like, you know what? It's about to start raining. I'll be done, right? So I think runners had an easy out to sort of downgrade. That was the other thing. If they would be in the middle of nowhere, 30 miles from the starting line, perhaps they wouldn't say, oh, let me downgrade, right? They would perhaps say, let's grind it out. And then the last aspect is that I think there were quite a few people who both rolled over their entry from last year because of COVID, and B, because of COVID, were undertrained, right? They didn't have any races to prepare for. They were like, well, I got a free entry. I might as well sign up for the distance, or might as well run the distance that I sign up for. And they went into this thing sort of underprepared. So I think those were the reasons why we had such a large drop rate.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's still a pretty huge drop rate, though.
It's huge, and I was hoping that we would get the official ultra sign up results. The folks from Lumberjack, they posted the top 3 finishers of each thing, and they posted finisher rate online, but they haven't posted anything, the full ultra sign up, because I'm curious. Because the way they're doing it is that if you'd signed up for the 100K and you drop down to the 50-miler, you get a 50-mile finisher time, but you are not officially listed, right? So,
okay.
Right?
Yeah,
so that's how I got in third, because I think that there were a lot of people who had signed up for the 100-miler, and they downgraded to the 100K, and they were faster than me, but they're getting a 100K time finish, but they're not ranked.
But because they didn't sign up for that rate. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? I mean, that's fair then to the people who actually signed up for that distance, right? Too. So it's good. So What else? What else is
So
there?
you got bronze. You got a bronze medal.
I got a bronze medal, and yeah, I mean, I've never.
Were you aware? Were you aware when you finished that you're top 3?
So, here's what I was aware of. So I was finishing run loop 3, and I knew that Scott was super strong. He only ran a 50 miler, and so he anyway could, hustle a lot more because he needed a loop lessons. But he's anyway faster than me. Let's just face it. But I knew that he had a chance of looping me, so he could.
Yes.
During loop 4, he could meet me on loop 3. And I was 3 miles out from the finishing loop 3, and I texted him. And I said, "Hey, dude, where are you at? I expected you long time to come around the corner, and we could, share a couple miles together or something." And he's like, "Dude, I'm here." And I'm like, "You're so close behind me. Come on, let's hustle." But I was moving quite quick during that time. I was moving my fastest power walking pace that you could walk on trails. So he had a hard time catching up with me. And then we were approaching the last mile, and I was like, well, shit, if he catches up with me now, then it's going to be mentally really hard for me to leave the aid station because he's all finished and he's all chill. So I tried to hustle in and get myself ready. So by the time we finally caught up, I had already fully changed my outfit, socks change, cleaned out my shoes. I was ready to head into loop 4. And he came up and he said, "Dude, I got second." And I was like, "Dude, wow, this is amazing." And he said, "Yeah, they said they had a really big drop rate. And so I got second." And I was like, "Well, congratulations. That's great. You get your margarita. I still have 2 more loops." Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
So we didn't chat too much, but then I went onto this loop thinking about this. And I was like, okay, there are 2 ways of looking at it. One is a 14-mile loop, 1.5 miles will be in the dark, in fairly thick woods, knowing rain is coming, with lots of people dropping. I'm going to be alone out there for a really long time. I'm not going to enjoy this. So I wasn't really happy about this. But then I was like, well, wait a second. There were already not that many people signed up for the 100K.
Yeah.
If lots of people drop, there's a chance that I can make it in the, top 10? Perhaps even top 5.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a possibility, right? Mm-hmm. So mentally, I was trying to figure out how many people, last time I checked Ultra sign up, how many people were signed up. So I tried to...
The math that we do out there is ridiculous.
Oh, it's
like,
bonkers.
okay, well, if I'm doing this, what time should I be done? And it's like, well, if there's 9 people ahead of me and they're going at this rate, it's all the story problems we hated growing up, right? Like,
yes.
And it's all we do. It's all we do.
It's the worst. I was trying very hard to figure out what else I could do with my time, but yes, I was doing that. And so because of that, I knew that there was a possibility. And then when I came to the finish, I was done. It was like 4 a.m. and they were like, "Wait, don't sit down quite yet. We got something for you." And I'm like, "What do you mean we can't sit down? I just ran for 20 hours, you ass."
Like...
Obviously it was a joke, but and then it's like, "Yeah, you got 3rd." And I was like, "You are kidding me, right?" And obviously, yeah, that's the greatest thing ever. I mean, I've never placed in anything before remotely.
That's awesome.
Obviously it felt good. Obviously,
what was your 3rd place prize?
I got a beer mug, I think medals everyone got, and then a gift certificate to Polsport Running. Polsport Running
nice.
Are the organizers of the race. So no, it was great.
Awesome.
Obviously it was not just I am such a great runner that I got 3rd place. It's also clear that I'm also last, right? There was no other 100K finisher runner on the course after me, right?
But there's something to be said about perseverance, right? Like,
well, exactly, and that's the other game that I played.
It's the tortoise and the hare. Right?
It's a little bit. That was the other game that I was playing. I was like, well, if I come in last and place, and this is sort of exciting, well, then I still am the one who actually finishes, and finishing is better than DNFing, right?
Ultra too.
What's that?
Going to increase your ranking on Ultra too,
dude. I know.
You're going to be coming in cocky on the next races.
Good thing my next race will humble me severely.
You're gonna be coming in. They'll be like, in the third place finisher from 100K out in Washington State,
Yeah,
Virginia Cycler, and you're gonna be like, oh fuck, no. It was out of 3, guys, out of 3. Gonna have a target on your back. It'll be great.
I know.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome that like you were out there and you were kind of aware of just if you continued on. I think that's a positive boost, and with the combination of the loops, so you always knew what to expect.
Yeah.
Like there's comfort in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's comfort in repetition, and while the loops seemed long, like at least you knew every step by the end, right?
I have to say, I mean, okay, I had a really, really good day on Saturday. I really did.
Yeah.
My food, nutrition worked. My body held up really well. I felt mentally strong the entire time. It got hard on like the last 3 miles. That's when I really wanted to be done, right? But I felt really, really good. I've never had a race where I felt just strong the entire time, right?
Nice.
And everything worked. And so as a result, I walk away from this saying, hey, I really like loop courses. That works for me. It's something that I'm familiar with. So, and I can train for, and I can compartmentalize. So a lot of people say they hate it, but the loop is long enough that it's not mind-numbingly short loops.
Yeah, it's a half marathon loop, right? Like that's a good section, because then you're like, okay, like if it was a 4 or 5 mile loop that you had to do, 12 times,
right?
That would be a little harder. But even so, that's enough of a distance where there's a routine, and like you said, you can compartmentalize it. It's bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
It's once you do one loop, now I'm this amount done.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, one other big thing I have to obviously say and give a huge shout out to a friend of the show, Tabitha Collins, who was working in the start-finish aid station as I came in at just around midnight, 11:30. From my 4th loop heading out into my 5th loop. And the rain had started and nightfall had set on loop 4. And I was still very much in the groove, but, at that point there was enough rain that the underbrush was kind of like closing in on the trail, so there was no way of staying dry. You just had to go through because there wasn't enough space. And the branches were all wet and stuff. So I came in and I was pretty wet, and I was like, okay, it's pitch dark. The rain is only going to get stronger. I somehow have to find a motivation to head back out there. And so I asked for some broth and some coffee, just something that wasn't sweet. And, changed my clothing a little bit, but I didn't want to sit too long because they sort of had a finish line party there with, the Evergreen Turtle Rockets there, Chuck was there. And so, it was hard emotionally to wanting to head back out into the night alone on top of it, right? And I didn't express any of that. I was just like, okay, I do need to gather myself, but I don't want to spend too much time. For that loop, I didn't go back to the car. I didn't need additional adjustments. I just wanted to get it done. And Tabitha goes, hey, do you want me to pace you? And I was like, you are kidding me. Are you serious? And, listeners of the show know Tabitha. She is super strong runner. So her offering that spontaneously didn't make me hesitant in wondering if she, if she would become a liability or so, if there would be another random person who I don't know and they've already on their 3rd margarita and they're like, hey, do you want to pace me? I'm like, I'm good. I'd rather go by myself. Thank you very much. Right. But I know how strong she is and how experienced she is on these ultras. And I was like, I would absolutely love this. And she like, hey, give me 5 minutes. Let me quickly grab a couple things and I'll be back and we can go. And
nice.
That was the most incredible thing that I've ever experienced.
That's amazing.
I didn't.
That's truly, yeah.
I didn't have this.
That's just a That's just a dopamine boost all around.
Oh,
right?
it was crazy, right? I didn't have it planned. I could have. I would have done it without her too. I had reserved my battery on my phone and my headphones that I could have listened to music, but heading into pouring rain up trails that increasingly got really muddy and slippery, big puddles that you in the pitch dark, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden have somebody there with you who is like, you come to the aid stations on the trail and they're like, let me change your water bottles for you. What do you want to eat? And stuff, right? And I still know, she didn't know the route, so I still, navigated, and obviously I set the pace, meaning my speed was how fast we went, right, the way it's supposed to. She didn't carry anything for me. But to all of a sudden in loop 5, after 16 hours, have somebody who starts telling you stories and you start talking about stuff, time just flies, right? You completely forget that this is supposed to be hard, right?
Yep.
And so it wasn't.
Exactly.
So
that's really cool.
It was really amazing.
Yeah. I'm glad that the experience was just overwhelmingly good. I know there was some trepidation with the DNF going into it. Just some uncertainty of like, well, how are you going to respond? But I think this was a good kind of like, oh, okay, great. You're still on track. Everything's good.
Yeah. No, it was exactly what it needed to happen to sort of boost my excitement, and also from a recovery point of view. I mean, we were talking in the beginning how we by now are such sort of experienced outdoor people that we know that we can go long and we know how to behave and stuff. I mean, I feel good. I don't have any injuries. I don't have any big recovery thing to worry about. I want to be smart to not like overdo it. Yeah. But I don't feel like, okay, I need another 2 weeks off to come back from this.
Yep. No, that's awesome. That's really good that you can kind of... I saw that you walked down to watch the game yesterday.
Yeah.
France, Germany. Was that yesterday or the day before?
Day before.
One of those days.
Day before, yeah. Let's not talk about the European Championship.
Why? Own goals are so fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
There's nothing worse than that. But no, as soon as I saw that you're out and about, I was like, oh yeah, you're recovered well. Like, obviously you're going to take it easy and not just keep diving into like 70-mile weeks, right? But like, you don't have any like severe tightness and things like that. How are your feet doing?
Well, so here that's exactly the thing, right? I mean, I feel like I'm starting to figure this out a little bit. This was the first really big ultra where I didn't have feet problems. And I think it has something to do with the fact that I wasn't running on crazy desert, hard-packed desert trail, right? The last times when I had major blister issues was Zion and then rim to rim to rim. And if you think about it, the time on feet, the heat, the hard baked clay and rocks that you run through on these deserts. I mean, I'm just not used to that, and so my feet don't know how to respond. And I feel good that I feel like I can put these pieces together, because that means I can run these distances. My body's conditioned enough. It's just that on that kind of surface, I suffer, right? Yeah.
Well, it's just getting used to it, and that's just hard to do anytime you leave your own terrain to go somewhere else.
Yeah,
unless you're going from like rocks to cushy trails of the Pacific Northwest. I think if you go that, but then you worry about roots and other issues, right? Like,
roots and humidity.
It's never easy.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the Pacific Northwest, what you deal with is you have this like 10-foot tall underbrush that's super overgrown into the trail that is often boggy and humid and stuff, and you just have to fight through that stuff. And if you're not used to that, if you come from Colorado where you constantly run above tree line, I think that stuff is probably going to kill you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You getting into that soupy weather is hard to do.
Yeah.
For sure.
So yeah, this was
that's awesome. Yeah.
This was Lumberjack. I can recommend it. I mean, it's a good race. It sort of flies a little bit under the radar because it's not in any of the prominent areas, and because it's a looped course, I think we sort of look down. It's also not a qualifier for anything, so I think people don't seek it out. But sure, the repetition gets you to a point where, like, would I want to go out there and do it again? Well, I don't know. Perhaps in next year I think about it differently. But I think it's a great way for you to sort of like test yourself, because you always come back to your car. You can really like, this didn't work, and you don't have to like have 8 drop bags being driven out to 8 stations. That takes a level of like foresight and planning and experience that's a lot more intimidating than to just say, well, every 12, 14 miles I get back to the car if something doesn't work. Like I took my poles. I didn't take my poles in the first loop. After the second, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take my poles. And I could have considered even dropping them for the third one. And then picking them back up for the fourth type deal, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's awesome. I really like this. It sounds like a good early season. Like, I know it's not spring, but like, this is kind of when you want to, like you said, have that test, push yourself a bit, because from now on, the weather's going to be getting better. Ridge lines are opening up. Like, all of these things are happening. So now, if this was your race to kind of get in good summer adventuring shape, then you're ready to rock.
Yeah.
Like, you're good to go on some really long, fun days if you wanted to.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
So
that's awesome. I was watching it, and I was watching everybody's Stravas come in, and like, I was like, okay. And yours uploaded like late too. You were liking people's posts before yours came on Strava.
Yeah, and that was...
And I was just like, okay, what happened? And like, on Ultra Sign Up, there wasn't anything. On the website for the race, there wasn't anything. I was like, I don't know. Like, you would have entered it unless you didn't run it at all. Right. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, I know you ran it, so what happened? And I was just waiting. But
so here's what happened, and that is, I knew that it wouldn't take me more than 24 hours. My battery on my watch is good for 24 hours. I didn't take it down into a battery saving mode for this one. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I got the breadcrumb feature. Do you have the breadcrumb feature on your watch? Yeah, you do. Because I ran...
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So that feature is brilliant for these looped trails that are super twisty, where you do need it. Signage was great overall, but there were some turns that you could have easily missed if you were sort of, heads down, in your thoughts somewhere or so. And so, especially for Loop 4, when it was starting to get dark, and Loop 5, I had my watch on breadcrumb, and the cool thing was that I didn't have to upload the race course beforehand, because I've already run that loop 3 times, right? So I've seen my previous tracks, and I see myself on it. And so in areas where I felt like there are chances that I could miss a turn, and several people did miss turns, and I just had this breadcrumb feature on, and I just I sort of looked at it, and I was like, yep, still on trail. Yep, still on trail. And that gave me a huge amount of confidence in navigating the course late in the race. But because of it, my battery got sucked down faster, and I didn't have... Hello, summer. We've got lawnmowers outside. Sorry, everyone. Because of that, my watch went into power saving mode by the time I went into the finish line. And so by the time I was back in the car, it was a 2% battery. And I was like, well, I could upload now, but I don't want the upload to accidentally crap out because of battery issues or whatever. So I'm just not going to upload until I'm home and the watch is started charging. So
That's fair. Yeah.
That's why it took so long.
Yeah, I woke up the next morning and saw it, and then I was like, well, we're going to talk this week. But I'm like, I'm so curious what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously you would upload in the car as soon as you have like cell coverage, and Port Gamble had cell coverage the entire way. So it wouldn't have been a big deal. But because I was in power saving for the watch, I was like, I got to wait, right? And and also didn't immediately drive home, right? I mean, it was 4:30 by the time I arrived. I sat by a fire for like an hour, tried to sleep a little bit, right? And then went into the car and got changed and tried to rest for another half hour or so.
Yeah.
And by like 6:36, I think, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to sleep here. It's starting to be daylight.
Light enough now. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was worried that after being up all night and running 20 hours, that driving, I would have to be really careful with driving. And I was like, 6 a.m. back roads, I can just drive below speed limit and be good, right? And
exactly. Yeah, and that's a good road where it's not super crowded that early in the morning, especially on a Sunday.
Exactly.
Like, you're good.
Exactly. Yeah. So...
No, that's awesome. Like, I was super happy to see that. And I was like, part of the problem with this podcast is that as much as I want to message you about it and talk to you about it in the moment, I'm like, we have to talk about it on the podcast. So I have to wait for all of these stories until like Thursday. So
you're like, I want to ask.
Because I want it to be fresh. Like, I don't want to hear all about it. So, like, I mean, I do, but I don't want to, like, ruin the excitement and the story time.
Yeah. So. Well, cool.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now you got some pressure for your next race. Top 5?
Well, I don't know.
Top 5, Monte Rosa. That's good. That's my prediction.
It depends on how many people are dropping, right?
I was good. Yeah. Yeah, I heard that they're bringing in some race organizers from another country that aren't allowed to operate races anymore. So just hang back for a bit and you'll get that top 10 finish.
Exactly.
It's a terrible joke. So speaking of not finishing,
before we
yes, go ahead. Yeah,
I'd like to do a little bit of some kitchen sink cleaning and announce a few little things that need to be announced that are not really big topic stuff. One of them is for people interested in the Little Backyard Adventure course. I'm going to be starting orientation runs again. Join the Rock Candy Running Strava group, and I annoyingly enough posted it on Facebook too. Next Wednesday, the 23rd, 6 p.m. And we meet at LBA, the shelter, and we're running the course. The course is slightly different. Most likely will be slightly different from 2 years ago. So if you want to get to know the course will be marked. You can come out to an orientation run. Won't be the only one. Orientation run, so there will be a couple, but it won't be as many as last time because we don't have that much more time. But we will have some orientation runs. So that's number one. Number two is, dear listeners of the podcast, we're making a few changes to the way the podcast is edited. We are upgrading. Woohoo! So if you have a podcast player and you look at last week's, and we started it, but with this week's, and going forward, there will be chapter markers. So any new topic should show up, and if there are any links that we're talking about, you immediately can click on the link right in your podcast player. Now, if you listen to this while driving, don't do this. If you listen to this while running, well, that's up to you if you want to destroy your run and look at our awesome links. But there will be chapter markers, which is very exciting. And then the heads up is that I am planning on moving the show to a new server configuration in the next couple weeks. So there might be some disruption with your feed. If there are, we will make announcements right in your feed. So if something doesn't update the way you expect it, check the website and see if there's a new show. There are no show disruptions planned on our end. So you will get our show regularly every week. But if you don't get anything, then it could be that the feed got disrupted. So you need to check that. And with that, it could also be that you all of a sudden get like every episode downloaded again or shown up. So there's some disruptions. Pardon the dust. Apologies in advance. I don't quite know how it's going to be like, but
it's going to be a wonky few weeks. But once it's organized, then it's going to be a routine, and you're not going to notice any disruption or multiple downloads or anything. It'll just be a temporary issue.
Exactly. So I wanted to quickly mention this halfway through the show and not just at the end, so people are aware of that. And I guess I should personally last time when we were finishing up the show, I got an email in the last like 5 minutes, and my airline that had booked flights to Europe emailed me and said, "Hey, we canceled one of your flights."
Jesus.
I was like, I am so excited about that. So I spent the entire rest of Thursday
sewing together a long enough jacket so your kids can ride on each other's shoulders so it looks like one person.
It was, so I had to, because the automated email just said one leg of the flight was canceled. And so I had to figure, and then it was only for voucher, right? So I had to call, and luckily so here's the story, right? Luckily, they immediately offered full refund. So they offered a refund, they initiated a refund, but it didn't show up on my credit card account right away, right? It took like a week. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, okay, what am I doing? Do I burn my credit card and book a second flight, or do I wait until the money's in account? Well, a prudent person would have probably waited, but I was looking at flight prices, and I was looking at country border openings, and I was like, if I wait, will pay $1,000 more for these flights. So immediately rebooked. So I have 2 full 4 people flights to Europe on my credit card account. It was like, sweet. Oh my gosh!
I think that's a humble brag about your credit limit there. You're like, oh yeah, I had to put thousands of dollars of extra charges on this black card. Oh,
I guess so, but.
No, that's rough. That's definitely a little bit stressful because you're like, they better reimburse this shit.
Exactly. It did not feel pretty. Well, the reason I'm saying is because I rebooked, and within 24 hours, Switzerland announced that they're opening their borders to U.S. travelers. And
prices just...
I haven't looked yet. I didn't want to look. But I was like, I booked, and I'm good.
Yep, exactly. No, that's good. It was taken care of. But, wow, that's an exciting into last week.
That was a little bit shaky there for a moment because I have additional stuff booked in Europe already. Right? So if I would have not gotten to go, because that was the other thing. So immediately the thought was, well, wait a second, if the airline cancels my flight, there's a reason for that. And one thing, right, we sort of are in our country on one trajectory for opening. And that is more people are getting vaccinated, cases are dropping, mostly in region where people are actually being vaccinated. Yeah. But in general, things kind of slowly but surely lead into the direction that we wanted to, which is back to somewhat of a normalcy, right?
Yep.
And we have to understand, and especially as an international traveler, you have to consider that other countries are on a different trajectory. They might handle this differently. They might deal with variant setbacks or bureaucracy or vaccine rollouts very, very different than over here. And so I've been trying to read European news, different countries, right? Switzerland is not part of the European Union. And while Italy and Austria and Germany are, that doesn't not necessarily mean that they're dealing with this all in the same way. And so it was sort of a few hours of like, well, does that mean that Europe is going to close back up and everything is fucked, right? I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so that was a little bit nerve-wracking there.
Well, it'll work out, and now you have like I said, an expectation of at least the top 10 finish. So.
That's great. You're gonna remind me of that now.
Oh yeah, that's never going to end. The worst thing you could have done was place in the top 3 in this last race. You should have just asked for a 4th place finish. No, it's I only kid because that's still awesome. But yeah, I think getting out to Europe and seeing the differences, like I'm very curious how it's going to be there versus how it is here, because here it's pretty much normal again. Like, especially in Montana where our cases are negligible, like next to nothing. There's no real issues, and tourism's back open fully. Mask mandates are gone, and the only people getting sick are the ones not getting vaccinated, and it's not like getting a vaccine's that hard. So, like, my sympathy level for anybody here that's currently getting it is maybe lower than it should be, but
Well, I mean, exactly. I think especially with the vaccine available, right? And I think that's a big difference in Europe.
There are people who have other conditions where they haven't been, maybe they had COVID recently and still aren't able to get a vaccine or something like that. That's okay. But like the ones who haven't had it and aren't getting it, but in every other country where vaccines are so much harder to get and the rollout isn't there. It definitely is interesting.
That's exactly it, right? That Europe has invested heavily in testing strategies. So, I mean, you can probably get a free test at every street corner, from what I'm gathering, right? But you being eligible to get the vaccine is hard. And so there are a lot of people who say, we'd like to get vaccinated, but we can't. And I don't even think officially they've approved for people younger than 16 yet and stuff, right? So for a lot of families, that adds additional pressure, right? And again, right, and that's the same thing over here. It's like, I feel super lucky that my daughter just hit 12 this last year, so we didn't even have to play this game of like, like half the family's vaccinated and the other half isn't type deal, right? We were able to just get it done all in one go, and so it does feel like it's starting to get back to normal, and that feels really great. But yeah, every country is different, so it's gonna be interesting to see how travel. I mean, it was already weird just like traveling down to Utah and seeing how different they handle it down there, right?
So depending on the population density and all of that as well, it's just so different.
No, exactly.
It's been wild to just like, I've been going out to restaurants. I went to a brewery the other day. Like, I was like, what is going on? And I'm vaccinated, and it's fine, and it's very strange. And seeing the national parks the way they are, and knowing that they're just back to normal is kind of nice. It was very surreal when there was still the heavy mask mandate in the parks, where like when they opened up, but everybody still had masks on. It was odd to walk around and see that, and now it's just like smiling faces again.
Yeah, at lodges, are the lodges open?
Yep.
I feel like
the lodges are open, and the signs on there basically say like, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask.
I feel
and
like
of course, no one's wearing a mask, but that's not me.
Yeah,
like it's fine. Like I can't be responsible for everybody else.
I don't know if Rainier is fully open yet. I feel like I just saw a sign that was saying that Paradise Inn isn't open yet or so. I don't know. I feel like I just saw that, so I don't know if they're quite there yet.
Yeah, it really, I'm not sure how it's being managed on a federal level versus state. So,
absolutely.
But
it's gonna be. I mean, we could have endlessly. We have another topic which is more juicy, but we could have a big, long conversation just around the craziness of everybody having this pent-up demand of wanting to travel, and national parks are going to, they were already previously breaking under the visitor load, and it's going to only get crazier, right?
I'm so conflicted on this. The Washington Post ran an article, like we can talk about this, because the Washington Post ran an article that said like national parks are too full and everything, and the only national park they talk about in the article is Arches. Okay. And they talk about how Arches stops allowing people in. Arches has been doing this the last 6 years. Yeah. This is nothing new. Once it gets crowded, there's only one road in and out. That makes sense. Once there's no parking, you just don't let anybody in, and then when a car leaves, you send another car in. Yeah. They do that at Hurricane Ridge, right? Yeah. They do that from Longmire up to Paradise. It's nothing new. And then, so out here in Yellowstone, we had the busiest May on record.
Yeah.
I was one of 3 people at the Grand Prismatic Overlook on a Saturday afternoon in May. That's one of the most popular places.
Yeah, yeah.
We're supposed to be having the busiest June. I went to Old Faithful on a Sunday afternoon, and I parked in the very first row, and there was almost no one there. Mm-hmm. There is this, every place is crowded, every place is crowded conversation. The visitor statistics prove it, that more people are visiting, but the actual crowding in the park, I go to the park every week. The actual crowding I see in Yellowstone National Park is no different than any other summer. No different than any other May, no different than any other June, at the popular spots and the not popular spots. I am very confused by this because the narrative that we're being fed is that it's being overrun and is not manageable and everything, while the parking lots and the boardwalks and the popular areas speak to a different level.
Do you think, I mean, I obviously believe you. I have no reason not to. Do you think it could have something to do with the fact that school has been so wonky for a lot of kids and people working from home, and so therefore people have the ability to travel more during non-peak times? And so
I've seen more people in camper vans, U-Hauls, other large vehicles that are in their 20s and 30s in the parks than I have in any other year.
Yeah, and they are coming then midweek, and they're spreading this out because they don't.
And they're spreading it out.
Exactly, and so they don't have to be. And I mean, I guess that's a good thing, right? Because if that stretches, I mean, then the visitor numbers are up, but in a more sustainable way because they're spreading it out, and so it's not like this thing that we're getting at the Longmire entrance at Rainier, where on Saturday you've got a 2-hour wait to try to get into the gate, and on a Thursday no one's there, right? I mean, if that spreads it out a little bit, I mean, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, my friend that came from Olympia to visit had never been to Yellowstone before and was very concerned about the crowds.
Mm-hmm.
And we entered 3 different entrances, 2 of the more crowded entrances, and the longest we waited was 4 minutes. And that was a Friday afternoon, a Saturday, and a Sunday.
Yeah.
And he was like, I thought it was supposed to be crowded. And obviously I know where to go at the right times. I'm well versed in the ebb and the flow of the traffic. But even so, if you arrive at Old Faithful at 4 p.m. on a weekend, you expect people to be there. You expect it to be absolute chaos, and it was not. And that's my experience in one park. There are definitely parks. There was a line of 35 cars yesterday, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when I finish what they're in line for and when, it's impressive. There's a line at 35 cars at the east entrance of Glacier National Park yesterday, the St. Mary's entrance. They were in line at 10 a.m. to be able to drive across the Going to the Sun Road after reservations, after you don't need a reservation after 6 p.m. They were waiting from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock to drive over the road. That's fucking crazy, right? That's that is, yeah, okay,
or
I get
insanity.
that. Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, it's... Yeah, I don't know why you do that. Just turn around. If there's only 20 cars, like, don't be in line. That's only 20 cars, right? Like, and it never got it only got to like 30 cars, and then everybody bailed because they were like, why are we doing this? But like, you know, there are ways to limit crowding, and it seems like the parks are handling it pretty well. I haven't seen or really heard of any real issues. For how many people are going to the park, behavior is incredibly good.
Well, I mean, that's all.
My little rant.
That's all really, really great. That's all really great to hear.
Yeah, good. It's crowded, but like you said, if you try and go up to Paradise on Saturday morning, you're gonna expect not to be alone.
Right, exactly.
But if you plan around, then you're adding to visitation of people when people may not be going there. And all you have to do is just plan things differently. Get there early in the morning or have an afternoon evening, and you're going to avoid most of the crowds. It's very simple to do.
And since
almost every park.
Since you're already talking about national parks and public lands and outdoor PSAs, another important one is that even though it's June and even though we're hitting 80, 90 degrees this weekend, be careful in the mountains. There's still snow. There was just a fatality at Mount Rainier this week where somebody crashed through a snow bridge, and they were only able to recover the body downstream. Yep. So, I feel like I already know where that place was. Even though they didn't actively say that, but there are so many easy lookouts on the road up from Longmire to Paradise where you can quickly stop your car and you see a stream and there's some snow and you feel like, wow, this is like 3 feet of hard packed spring snow that should hold me, but this stuff is melting and
it's really only 2 inches, and that's that.
It's super, super treacherous. So be careful as you're heading out there, both in preparing the kind of gear that you're taking and you bring the right mental state, right? I mean, if you head out with your family and you realize, oh, wow, there is still snow, perhaps turn around and don't feel like I got to have that summit or complete that loop. Because mountains still have snow. It is only June, and we had record snow here in the Western Washington.
Yeah, we had a very, very good snow year, and it's all gone. At a concerning level. The one thing I do want to talk about crowding that I didn't mention because I was specifically talking about parks is there is a level of anger and frustration that you will more than likely encounter or even have if you are visiting one of the towns outside of a national park. And this is a large conversation about tourism in general, is the town of Gardner, Montana, is a town of a couple thousand people. Traditionally, it is a popular place in the summer because it's the north entrance to the park. It's the traditional, most iconic entrance to Yellowstone. And it is very popular, and normally they can handle this. But what we're experiencing around the parks, if you're going to visit them, not the parks in general, but outside of the parks, is there is a lack of staffing, a serious lack of staffing that is occurring at all of the restaurants, all of the hotels, all of the stores. And here in Gardner, they don't have any staffing to keep most restaurants open past 8. And even when they are open, they're absolutely slammed because we're having record numbers of visitors. Every single place that I see that I visited in Gardner is hiring right now because they don't have the workers, and that's because of COVID. We don't have people coming from overseas. We don't have people coming from out of state to work at the same numbers. And if you are going to be visiting a national park somewhere, go to a grocery store far from the park and plan on doing all your meals that way. If you try and go to a restaurant, chances are you're not going to be able to make a reservation, and if you walk up, you're going to be waiting at least an hour. This happened to me over the weekend, and I saw the worst of humanity taking place, and I was very upset by that. But it wasn't in the park. It's not a park issue.
It's not a park issue at all, right? I feel like we are still we are hitting a very, very, oh my gosh, what a conversation, right? We are hitting a very, very precarious situation in this country right now. And it's probably not just the country, it's globally, but in this country especially. We're coming out of COVID, so people are very socially awkward, and the situation is pressured. Everybody has these demands that because they survived COVID and had this trauma that they now need to go all out and have all these expectations. And they forget that everybody had dealt with COVID, not just them. And then COVID shut everything down and challenged the entire service industry. Some people are running away from service jobs because they've been treated poorly and they don't want to work in this environment anymore. Some people can't work in this environment anymore because of health issues or whatever. And so the service industry is under intense amount of pressure because it's the one industry that interfaces with the public on a regular basis and is vastly underpaid for the work that they're performing. And therefore, I'm pretty sure every therapist that took on new clients over the last year probably raised their rates by 25%, and nobody batted an eye because they're like, people, it's COVID, I need my therapy, so I'm willing to pay for it, right? And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done that. I mean, that's the whole point of capitalism. That's supply and demand. If this is needed, then this needs to happen, right? But service industry still gets paid barely minimum wage, and they are dealing with a public that is reeling from their trauma, and they've always, all their life, taken service and going out and going shopping as a way of therapy for them, for the poor man's person, and that is an absolute recipe for disaster, right?
Yeah, and there's this mentality that of being entitled to whatever you want that service industry employees are having to face. Yeah. They always have, but it has been amplified right now. What got me this last time was I was sitting outside a restaurant. They told me it'd be about a half-hour wait, and I was like, "Oh, I'll wait for a bit. You know, that's fine. We're in no hurry." And then it became the only restaurant in town open. There's a now hiring sign in there, and the family that owns it happened to have immigrated from another part of the world, and they opened this restaurant 20, 30 years ago, right? They're cornerstones at Gardner. However, there was a family from Nebraska that came in and came out, said some slurs, and then was talking about how they couldn't understand why people in this town just didn't want to make money. They're like, there's a demand for everybody's hungry. Everybody needs to eat. Why aren't they staying open longer? Why aren't they doing this? And so because I use my white male privilege when I can, I basically was just like, I broke down the entire economic system of Gardner, Montana, and asked them if they were so expectant of it, why don't they move their family here and then work for federal minimum wage at a restaurant to be treated poorly by customers like you? And the guy was not very thrilled about that, but I didn't care because that can't happen. Yeah. You can't go someplace and expect everybody to bend over backwards for you when they're making more than enough money with their limited hours right now, right? Yeah. They don't need that business to stay in business.
Right.
There's there's no reason for them to put any more stress or pressure on themselves than they already have.
Well, and, if they can't hire, I mean, we've had a couple new restaurants opening in Olympia, and they opened with limited hours because they don't have enough, they don't find staffing. If it's a hiring issue, then you can only open for one shift, and that's that, right? And then you have to have this whole conversation around supply chain, and that is, I mean, we're hearing that Starbucks is running out of product. I mean, Starbucks, they were like the supply chain kings, right?
Yep.
I mean, we are essentially in the worst for the survivors. We are in the worst phase of a pandemic, of one of those like mass tragedy events, if you will, right? Because on one side we've survived and we're fine. So, but no one has dealt with their trauma. And so emotionally, mentally, nobody knows how to behave, and that results in only dangerous situations from a social point of view, right? And if you are an underpaid minimum wage, restaurant worker, why aren't you walking out on people like that? You don't need that shit, right?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, being treated like that, it's just completely unnecessary, and it's tough because America has built a service industry, a retail service industry, retail and restaurant service industry that has always said, if I show you my credit card, I get everything I want.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and that was the overwhelming majority. Like, the guy that was just railing against everything had, like, a crowd of people around him agreeing with him. I was like, I mean, but they're also like, you could tell how they voted and how they handled COVID.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there is there are certain people who have that expectation, and there are people who go and visit these places, and we waited a half hour, then it was 45 minutes, and then I was like, you know what? Like, we don't need to do this. We can just go drive somewhere. We're already leaving town. We don't need to put them under this pressure. So I walked in, thanked them and told them, hey, you can take our name off the list. You guys are doing a great job, and just left. Because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? But, like, if you are dealing with anybody, think of how you would run that restaurant or run that store. If you were an employee there, how would you want to be treated? I mean, it's the golden rule. It's the easiest thing to do that no one does to service employees because, like you said, you just sit and tap that credit card. Give me what I want. Give me what I want.
Well, if we would live in our world, I'm going to say beyond country, even though really country. If we would live in our world that we would treat other people the way we want to be treated, then a lot of things would be better. A lot of things. But that's not the system that we've built, right?
No.
Capitalism wouldn't work that way.
Yep. Well, and that's what I like launched into. I was like, this is capitalism at its finest, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to set the hours they want and charge the prices they want, and everybody is paying. They can do what they want. This is capitalism at work. This is the society we have.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that he wants to be served is essentially Marxism. He's basically saying,
right?
I'm here, and I want a fair share of standing in line for my banana.
Well, and that's where I was like, and that's why we need to get a better minimum wage so you can entice workers to come to places like this. They can't afford to live here at minimum wage. There's not enough housing. There's not enough infrastructure. There's not even a hospital here. And I was like, who cares? At this point, I was just like, I don't care anymore. Yeah. Like, I can't handle this. And everybody was sitting down, so no one was standing up to be confrontational. Body language was just there. And the best part was this guy that was complaining had 3 kids, probably all under the age of 15. And when he first started complaining, they were like, it's not that big of a deal, Dad. Like, we had a late lunch. We're not that hungry. We can go to the grocery store and get a Lunchable. And the guy was still losing it. And I was like, all right, so I'm gonna make sure that these kids know that there's someone on their side too.
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
it's
this
going to
is
be a great
widespread.
summer, people.
Yeah,
If
this
you're
is widespread,
traveling-
and this is the stuff that you will see with overcrowding in national parks and around national parks.
Any
There's going to be
vacation
people in
destination.
popular areas,
Yeah.
but other than that, you're just going to have this level of humanity seeping through. You're going to have this expectation that everyone bends over backwards for a person and that that person is the most important person in the world. That's how most people are thinking right now.
Yeah. And it's tough, right? Because we're trying to escape from this by going on vacation. And if we are going in crowded places, increasingly the outdoors and vacation, everybody's taking vacation after being stuck in, right? We are confronted by this. And I think since we can't fix it, as you were suggesting, we need to be smart, right? Go to grocery stores, try to avoid the most crowded restaurants. Don't put your foot down and think you need to have that experience just because you read somewhere that you need that experience. I think those are all really, really important things. The more self-sufficient we can be, the more gracious we can be, the more understanding we can be of the situation, right? It's not just that we are going to be giving some good juju out into the world, the better time we are having, because if we can avoid being there, while it was good that you were the warrior in that situation and stood up,
it stuck with me and it ruined my day.
Exactly, right? And if you are on vacation and you feel like you have to play that role, that puts you into a difficult place. And so it's better in that scenario to just step away and find places where you can be by yourself and you're not forcing yourself in. I'm so curious how Europe's going to be for the family, right? Because I wouldn't be surprised if it's not much different in certain scenarios, right? The expectations, demands, the challenges and stuff. So I hope that we can navigate that
Yep. I mean, when you do interact with people, just like you said, be gracious. If there's an opportunity to tip them, or you just thank them and look them in their eye and thank them for being there.
Correct.
Like I do that to the volunteers who are directing traffic around bear jams, and every time, like, I do it because I truly appreciate them. I don't. However they react, but I truly appreciate the people that are doing this right now, because I don't know if I could mentally handle it, and not being thanked and constantly shit on by every single person you encounter has to get to you. So in any way, shape, or form, be gracious.
Be gracious. That sums up the episode of Single Track for this week. Next week will be amazing, as we say.
If you like what you hear on our podcast, like, subscribe, share, and go to Outdoor Society to follow a link to sign up for the Little Backyard Adventure. I saw that you changed the header on that. Show notes will also have all of those things in there as well.